Hey, men, and welcome back to One Man's Journey. Today, I am blessed to have Philip Sessions with us. Philip is a Christian husband, girl dad, and the most persistent person you'll ever meet. I may challenge you on that one, Phil. Philip went from being the shy, quiet guy to one who commands any room he enters. Through his persistent efforts and transformative communication methods, he has helped himself and hundreds of others bring confidence and clarity to their lives and transform their businesses. I've seen this firsthand. I know this is like our third time meeting on camera in like the last 8 days, I think. And I think I just can't get enough of Philip. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Philip, so the audience can feel the same. Appreciate you being here. Let's hear your story.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be on here, and I just want to make sure every conversation we had was while we're still in Puerto Rico instead of being back stateside and everything.
Makes
So
sense.
that's why I had to collapse the times we got together and talked. Now, but for me, like was mentioned in my intro there, I was a shy kid. I remember being in grade school. I was third grade, I believe it was. I had missed a day of school. I come back to school and I asked the teacher, "Hey, what did I miss?" "You were gone?" She had no clue that I was even there. Fast forward to junior high and high school. I was the good kid, the kid that was still quiet, still shy, got passed over for everything. Finally, senior year, I step out a little bit, and then, but it was just amongst my friends. Still wouldn't really talk with girls, still wouldn't really talk with a lot of people or in front of a lot of people. And I just, the same thing kept happening. I get passed over. The only time that maybe people would look at me and pay attention to me was when they needed somebody there, somebody they could depend on, and they would come to me. Going into college, I decided to start making some changes, and that's where I got into fitness, started really putting priority on my health because I said, "Hey, I'm going out of the city. I grew up in the Houston area, moved to San Antonio. I was like, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to start making changes." So one of those things was going to the gym to get the bigger muscles, to get more attention from women, which lo and behold, more men would come up to me and ask how I got such big arms than women. So the gym bros and all those guys. So it didn't quite work out like I thought, is it turned into more of an intimidating factor for women, and they thought that I would be putting them on a diet if we dated. So that was kind of interesting there. But I was on the cheer team actually at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I was the guy that threw the girls in the air. I didn't do all the flips and the gymnastics stuff. And I remember particularly at one practice, I had been the cheer captain at one point. At this point, I was not, though. I was no longer a leader. I was just a person on the team. The coach had told us, "Hey, Philip," sorry, he didn't say, "Hey, Philip." He just said, "Hey, team, we're going to go from this point to this point in our routine." And everybody was like, "What? What is he talking about?" And literally, I'm kind of in the center front of the mat where we're performing and everything, and literally all eyes turned towards me. And I look around, I'm like, "Oh, this is kind of weird. I'm not the leader. The coach just said something. Nobody knows what's going on." And everybody looked at me. And so I'm like, "All right, well, I don't know what coach said, but we're gonna go from this point to this point." Music starts. We nailed the routine for that time. That was the best we had ever done on that. But it was funny because there were so many times where I would try and lead the team, and yet the team didn't want me to lead them. But then when they needed somebody, I was there to lead. And this was how it always was. And then fast forward several more years to 2016, I was in a job. And this has been kind of happening. I was the young, dumb engineer in past jobs and everything, and always kind of getting passed over for any kind of promotion to do anything. But when the time was needed, they needed somebody, they always came to me. And this one manager, finally, he just kept like berating me, just putting me down and talking about how I just didn't put enough time in. I was putting 40 hours in because I was salary. That's what I was getting paid, 40, maybe to 45. I put in a little bit extra here and there, but I was not going to go up to like 60 hours a week. And that was kind of the expectation of this manager. But we go into these engineering meetings, and I would speak for 50 minutes of the hour-long meeting, every single meeting, about all the projects that I had going on. And the other engineers that were senior to me in age and amount of time they had been at the company were like, "We know how busy you are. We see how busy you are." And yet this manager just acted like, well, if you can't get your work done, maybe you need to work more hours. And I just got to this point where it's just enough is enough. I was finally tired of this. And when I finally realized why this was happening was because I wouldn't speak up for myself. Why I was getting passed over for promotions, for leadership opportunities, for people to give me the credit and allow me to actually just lead from the beginning instead of when the pressure was on, when they finally needed somebody they could depend on, was because I wouldn't speak up for myself. And from that day, when I finally decided to leave that company, when I got tired and it was the last time I was going to be talked down to, I said, I'm not going to be talked down to anymore. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make myself be the person that's respected every time I go into a room and people will look at me as the leader. And so from that day forward, I started working on that. And so that started with doing a podcast, doing video content, speaking my mind rather than just sitting back and not letting anything happen. And that's really the start of the journey for me as a speaking coach, was really going through my own transformational journey of being that guy that I was always looked at as the last resort person to be able to step up to be the leader, never looked at in a good light necessarily. Like it was just a good, shy, quiet person, did their job, hard worker, but never got any of that recognition for the things that I actually did. And all these other people would get that recognition. But as soon as I started speaking up for myself, as soon as I started speaking up, opportunities started to come my way. Things started to change in my life. And I started to control my life instead of my life being controlled by others. And so that's really why I started the speaking. And then going into that, I wanted to be able to help other people be able to have that transformation as well, to be able to create that impact, to be able to be the person that they wanted to be. And it all starts with communication. Every problem that we have in our lives, every situation that comes up, it's always due to poor communication from one party or both parties.
So obviously that's had a huge impact on business side and the things that you do. You know, I know you're still working a full-time gig right now and kind of managing the podcasting and the events, the virtual events that you run, which are amazing in themselves. You're kind of managing that. So obviously the leadership aspect has come out in the business piece, and we will definitely talk about that. But I want to focus, like, how has that changed in your personal life or even in your faith journey? As you mentioned, you're a Christian. How is the ability to communicate more effectively? And I know this from personal experience, when you start standing up and setting boundaries, it creates obviously a better environment for you. How has that changed in your relationships, in your day-to-day life? How has that changed that part of your life?
Dude, that was probably one of the biggest changes for me. I remember going back to being the guy that wanted to go to the gym, get the muscles to get the girls. I would start going on all these dates with girls, and there would always be issues. And I tried to self reflect and say, what is it that I'm doing wrong? What is it that maybe I can do better? Because it can't be literally every single one of these girls that's the problem. I mean, there definitely were some out there that they crazy, whatever it may have been, that they were the problem. We just weren't a good fit for whatever reason, but it kept being the same thing. We would date for a couple of weeks, couple of months, and then it'd be over. And what I finally found out was that I would try and hold back on my faith. I would sit here and, well, because my faith has been very important to me. Going to church and going to the actual physical building once or twice a week has always been very important to me. But when I would start to date these girls, a lot of times I'd be like, well, let me ease them into this. Let me not bring that up right away. Like we might talk about, like, oh yeah, I go to church, stuff like that. But I'll just say, like, act like, oh, it's just something I do. It's kind of like a hobby. And then later, once we've talked for a while, then I'll bring it in as it's something that's more critical to my life and something that's very important for me. And then typically that's where the issue happens. So finally, it was actually there was two girls I dated, one girl and then my wife. When I finally made this decision that, what, I'm not going to do this anymore where I go and like, church is important to me, but it's cool if you don't go, and then hope that later on they decide that they want to go. And that is a method to use in order to get people to be bought into whatever it is that you're working on. But I finally decided, no, this is going to be the top priority for me, because fitness was a huge priority for me. And I thought, like, hey, I want this like super fit girl, one that's like into the gym, one that eats healthy, all these things. And I had all these different priorities. And I had to sit back and do some self-reflection, and what was really the biggest priorities for me? Like, what were these things that were actual things I had to have in a relationship, and the things that were nice to have? And one of those nice to have things end up being the fitness. Like, yes, it's still important. I didn't want somebody that was just lethargic and just ate really crappy and couldn't get out of the bed because they always felt bad and stuff like that. But it wasn't something that was a priority anymore. But the faith was. That was the top priority for me. And so the first girl I dated, that was the reason why we ended up breaking up. And we had several discussions, several Bible studies because of that being a priority and me bringing that up front. And then I dated my wife, and at the time, of course, we were just boyfriend girlfriend, and we had that conversation because she'd start kind of go to church with me. She was a nurse working night shift, so she was working every other weekend and nights, of course, so she wasn't able to always go to church. And finally it just went from she was going when she could to I'm just not feeling it, and it started being less and less and less. And I finally had to have the conversation, and it's like, look, man, this is a priority for me. I expect this in my wife. This is something I want for my family and my future. So if this is something that you don't want to have in your life, then I don't think this is going to work out. And we did almost break up, but because we had that conversation, rather than because I was almost at the point where I was just going to break it off and then not say anything. And I say, you know what, I need to have the conversation. We've really been getting together, and I know I've told her, but past experience also showed me. I said, hey, this is important, but I didn't bring it up time and time and time again. And when you don't bring something up over and over again and show how important it is, how can you expect people to know that it's important? So I had to let her know that, hey, this is important to me. If this is something that you don't want to have, that's fine, but that won't work for my relationship. I expect my wife to be there going to church with me. I expect my family to be going to church. And now we're married, of course. So she did come around to that. And I wanted her it to be her thing as well. But because that was my thing and she wanted to be with me, she decided to submit to that, so to speak, and everything. But it was through that communication, that in knowing my priorities and communicating those priorities multiple times, that allowed me to have a wife that was bought into a thing that was a priority for me as well, and to fix those past relationships, which at the end of the day, when I look back, they were pretty much all my fault because I tried to not bring up the tough subject. I tried to not show the priority, show what was really important for me, and I wasn't standing on any firm ground. And I truly believe as men, we have to be the solid foundation. We have to be the cornerstone in our relationship between a man and a woman for them to be able to lean upon. We don't hear of past relationships with older generations where, oh man, that was a strong woman. She was the pillar of the house. We always hear that about the man. And I think too many times in our softer society, it's the roles are kind of starting to reverse. But psychologically, women aren't necessarily the leaders. And then from the Bible's perspective, the women aren't the leaders in the church, or well, the church, but also in the household. And the man has to be. So you have to have a solid foundation and you have to stand firm on something. And when I finally started communicating that and started being about that, that's when my relationships changed. So yes, communication has impacted my personal life so much.
Yeah, that piece about, like where you're talking about how you have to reiterate and say it, and continue to say it, and oftentimes we don't have to say it. We you and I have talked about leadership and the fact that there's, the verbal leader and then there's the action leader, and a
Mhm.
lot of times men think that the action leader is all they need to be, and it oftentimes doesn't show that way, right? Like, yes, your actions consistently will show the way of that you want to go. However, if you're not supporting it with your words and saying, yes, this is important to me, like you mentioned, we can get so lost so fast. And I think the tough part for us now as men entering this, like you're saying, that slight shift over, is now we're getting mixed, confusing messages. Now we're getting told by the women that we're seeing on social media that they don't want a man that's going to come in and say, this is what we need to do, this is the direction we're taking, and stand on their firm power. And then they also say that, that they're wanting somebody that's emotionally intelligent, and not understanding what comes with that either, right? Because emotionally intelligent men will not put up with emotionally unintelligent women. And I think that that's a huge problem that's transitioning across, because once you get that emotional intelligence, you have to be able to communicate it. Otherwise, you're still emotionally unintelligent. And so bringing that into that communication piece and being able to support all of that is so huge. I love that you've taken that direction. There's a reason that we're connected. And I think that's what you portray and what you put out into the world is every bit consistent with that. As far as the business side goes, the leadership piece, obviously, like we talked about, you've got the full-time job. And how do you kind of make those fit while still being the leader? Because you're doing a lot. And, you mentioned the girl dad thing, like that's a whole nother piece. So how does all of that stuff fit in? And how do you make it kind of gel? Because I think that's a huge issue for men right now, is trying to do it all, right?
Yeah, and so the biggest thing is being present in that moment, and it really goes back to communication. A lot of times, whenever there's strife, me trying to is I have a little shed that I come out from my podcast studio. I come out here to do my business work and everything. And when I say, "Hey, I've got to go do this," if I'm not communicating that up front with my wife, it gets very frustrating for her. But when I say, "Hey, I'm going to be here from this time to this time, and then this other time is for you," and so something I've done is really blocked off time. So it was every other Saturday that I wasn't really doing anything, but I found that after over time that blocking off the mornings of Saturdays and then nap time being roughly 12 to 2:30 for our daughter is when I can go and do something. And I still try and do every other Saturday. I'll try and find things that like I could stay in the house and work on the computer in there so my wife can go see her mom during that nap time and everything. And so really just trying to find ways to put into my calendar. And I come from somebody that my wife is not on board with all this. She's very much a go to a 9 to 5, come home, live life. She doesn't have huge ambitions, and that's fine. But as a business owner or somebody trying to build a business, that can be frustrating. And so what I've done is really blocked my time and made my time intentional and given her that time and not just been like, "Hey, by the way, babe, I've given you 6 hours on Saturday morning every other Saturday." No, because that sounds really stupid. But you just going and doing that and then you just happen to be there. You happen to not be busy every other Saturday now or whatever that schedule needs to be. But then when you are busy, say, "Hey, I need this time," and trying to plan that out and really just communicate that with your wife. If that's on a electronic calendar or a manual calendar, my wife doesn't like electronics, so we've got a calendar on the fridge, and so I'll write these things out like networking events. I'm talking about all those things, but going back to when I'm in the thing in the moment, I try and be in that thing in the moment. So when I'm in my 9 to 5, I'm in the 9 to 5. When I'm working on my side hustle, I'm on my side hustle. When I'm there with my family, I'm there with my family. And I'm guilty like everybody else. It's easy to get on my phone. It's easy to be distracted while you're there in the moment. And so you have to try and find ways. So one thing else I've done is turn off notifications, especially on Facebook. That's the one that's the worst for me. I'm one of those people. If I've got a red 1, 2, 10, whatever the number is, I've got to check it. I've got to complete it. And so I've had to turn the notifications off, so I don't even see it anymore. And that has given me so much time back doing that. But it's really about being intentional with your time, communicating intentionally and proactively about what's going on, and allowing your wife to have some input, and then listening in. And this goes back to the whole Saturday thing. Oh, every other Saturday, that'll be good. And I started seeing at first it was better because it was better than me basically every Saturday doing a little something. And now I'm taking time away from whatever she wanted to do, and I started seeing her start to gripe about, well, I wanted to clean, but I couldn't clean because our daughter's 2. So she wants to go climb on everything. And you can't hardly clean. And I'm out here in the shed doing my own thing. And so I listened, going back to your emotional intelligence, I listened to what she was really saying was, I need you to take care of her, even though she didn't say that because she didn't want to tell me you can't go do that. It's not that she doesn't want me to go do it. It's just that time wasn't a good time. And so I found that a time where our daughter's napping or after she's gotten the house chores that she gives herself to do done in the morning, that afternoon is a better time for me to get things done. And so I can schedule around that and everything. And so it comes down to that communication, both what's actually happening, but then based on some emotions that are shared or gripes that are said, taking a look at that and being introspective as well and realizing, I wonder if I change something, the way I do things, how I treat my wife, whatever, if that'll do things different. Which, speaking of treating, that's what I try and do. I try and be proactive about. She loves foot rubs and leg rubs, so I try and be proactive with that and give her those rather than waiting until she asks me for them. And I've noticed that doing those little things like that, that's time we're spending together, and then it's also something that I know she enjoys, and I'm just doing it without her asking. And we're all that way. Like I love it when my wife makes food for me. It's not, I mean, dinner is a little bit different. That's kind of been her duty that she's done. But if she's like lunch or something, normally she won't like necessarily make my lunch. But if she makes it for me, man, I feel special. Even though I can go do it myself, like I still feel special. So same thing, your wife wants to be treated special, and you should be treating her special.
Yeah, and that's creating that harmony, right? Like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Everybody's focused on balance, and if you're consistently focused on balance, like we break it down to the legitimate aspect of balance, right? 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of family, 8 hours of work. It's never going to happen, right? You can't do that every day. It's not possible.
Yeah.
And so being able to create those harmonies a bit where you were mentioning that you are present with her in those time frames, and then the aspect of giving her a break too. I know, as a almost dad here, doing a lot of reading, and that's one of the biggest things for them, right? Because they're on all the time, especially early in life, where they're the feed, they're the bottle, they're the feed. They have put them down for naps. If I pick up the baby, they're probably going to scream, and the mom's going to have to come in anyway. So but just giving them a break in those time frames and allowing them to like go be a person again instead of just being this milk machine for 24 hours a day. And I think that's huge, and especially with a 2-year-old now as well for you. I mean, like you said, she's climbing on everything, and it kind of makes doing housework completely impossible. So
Yeah.
you just stepping in and being able to take that over. That's huge.
Yeah,
Now,
and you mentioned just about harmony there. I want to bring up a point real quick. And a lot of times, as men, we feel like this is only happening to us, and we see the highlight reels on social media, and it's oh man, that guy, he's got such a supportive wife. I went to a networking event. It was all day. Well, it was more like a workshop than a networking event, but went to this workshop all day on a Saturday. It was 8 hours long, and I had told my wife ahead of time about it. And the day of, she's like, "Do you really have to go to that? Like that stupid thing?" And she wasn't calling it stupid, although the words literally said that. What she was really griping about was the fact that she was going to be stuck at home with our daughter all day and not get any help and not get any rest. And it's the weekend. We've been working all week. And now I'm going to go do this thing for me. And she's stuck with our daughter. So she was saying that. But I get there and I was talking with some of the guys that I'm friends with that happen to be there as well. And the funny thing, I was thinking, oh man, my wife's not supportive. I bet, they've been in business longer than me. Like their wives are probably pretty supportive of this. Nope. It was two other guys, or actually three other guys, and they all said the same thing. Do my wife complain about me coming here this morning? Like, so it's not just you. Your wife isn't complaining because you're going to do something. It's because of, like I said, now they've got to do something in addition. They're not really getting that break, and so it's kind of taking out of the emotional bank, and you're taking a withdrawal. So how do you put a deposit back in that emotional bank and everything? So you got to find that way to create that harmony and make sure that balance is still good, because as soon as you go negative on that emotional bank balance, it's gonna be terrible for a while. So
yeah,
make sure
that's
you keep
absolutely,
putting
yeah.
in positive, you keep putting in deposits into that emotional bank, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that I mean I've read obviously a ton of books, and I'm sure you have as well. And there's a quote out there at some point in one of the books that I've read talks about that, just like the deposit and withdrawal. And it's not even really a withdrawal, right? It's like a let's set this aside piece, instead of just like pulling it out. Like you're not taking it, you're utilizing it to grow something for us, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not, you have your own things that you do, and then you have the things that you're doing with the long-term vision of this is going to be awesome because we're not going to have to worry about finances. We're not going to I'm not going to have to work that 9 to 5 forever. And all of this stuff comes into play. And, you know, the theme here has been obviously communication and utilizing it as leadership aspect. The communication piece and is, you know, like we mentioned, is the most important. Being able to communicate effectively what the vision is and bring them into that vision creates instant harmony. And now you're going to, you know, you may have those side tracks where they say that on a Saturday morning, but that's the challenge for us, is like, instead of just saying, man, they're not supportive, or, you know, they always say, like, you know, my biggest one right now is I get up at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym, and my wife's like, just, it's too early, stay in bed. And I'm like, you know, I just keep reminding her, like, I wouldn't look like this if I stayed in bed, right? Like, we wouldn't have, you know, I wouldn't have the disciplines that I have. I wouldn't have the scheduling aspect that I have now. And so I just keep reminding, like, you know, if you want a husband that looks good standing next to you and holding our future kid right now, like, I got to go to the gym, and it's part of the daily thing. And it obviously leads to more treatment of her as well, because I've got a better outlook on life by going to the gym. So really, for
And
me, it's just like that communicating of the vision piece.
yeah, communicating that vision is important, but I want to bring up that point because we all go through this where your wife has told you, and it is legitimate, like, you know, a little bit there about like, hey, you know, it's too early, just stay in bed. And but the problem is, and this is a hard thing for guys to differentiate from women, and I've talked to enough men to be able to feel like I can say this with full confidence, that her saying that is really testing to see if you are really about what it is that you're about. And I don't know why, but it seems like women really just want to continue to test us as men and test if we're going to stand firm on the things that we say we're going to do. So if you say, this is my word, this is the thing I'm going to do, you have to do it. And if there's for some reason you don't do it, you better be proactive and communicate that. Because when you start to constantly be the guy that says, oh yeah, I'll do that for you, honey, or oh yeah, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be this person now, and you continue to not be that, they lose so much trust in you and so much confidence in you as the leader of them, of the household. And so you have to stand firm on what it is that you say you're going to do and not back down from your word. You have to stick to it. So yeah, that one day it might have not been a big deal if you decide not to go to the gym, but really in your wife, like, she, from the words, it sounds like it's not a big deal, but really in her mind, she's saying, "Wow, Ryan, it was just that easy for him to decide not to do something that he said he was going to do. What else is he going to decide not to do one day?" And in the back of women's minds, I feel like is that they're always worried that something is going to happen to them. I mean, I don't know about you, but my wife always talks about the dream that she has where I cheated on her, or, you know, she brings up us getting a divorce. Like, I'm going to divorce her and leave her one day. And I've given her no reason to think that. But that's the thing, that they are more emotional than us as men, and so they need that firm ground to stand on. They need that cornerstone to be able to lean upon, to have the stability in the relationship. And by you not sticking to your word means that you're not stable, means that you're really kind of more emotional. And so that's where the stoicism comes in. As a man, we have to stick to our word. We have to, no matter what, no matter how we feel. And that goes to our business, goes to being a leader. It doesn't matter how you feel today. It doesn't matter the situation, the weather, how much money you have in the bank, how many people want to actually talk to you about your product or service. You have to do the work anyways. You have to do the thing no matter how you feel. And that's what women need from us men. And we're missing that now. And I can think about my dad, some of the things that he would not necessarily say to my mom, but like, she would sit there and try and like, oh, you shouldn't do that, or I don't really want you to go do that. But it was something that he felt he needed to do, and he went and did it anyways. He didn't listen to the griping from her. And that's all it was. But really, at the end of the day, it was her testing to see if he was a man of his word. And so for us as newer generation men, where we had the feminist movement and all this other craziness going on, there's still a lot of women out there that want that men, and I would say pretty much all of them, that want a strong man that's going to stick to his word and not just do whatever the wife wants. And yes, you should be giving to the wife. You should be treating her well. I'm not saying to just disregard anything that she wants now. No. But when she starts to say those little comments like, "Oh, it's going to be okay if you don't do that." Like, really? Do you really have to go? That's when you really do have to go, because they're testing you to see if you're going to give in to the emotion. You're going to give in to them. And really you start to lose your man card by giving into that stuff. So if you want to be looked at as really as a man in your wife's eyes, you want to have that respect from your wife, stick to your word.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too, like you mentioned with the emotional piece, is the again, it goes back to not communicating the meaning of the action, right? It's the not communicating the vision that comes from the other side of the action. And even today, we had a little worry about money this morning, and the checking account got a little lower than she's comfortable with, and that it's not, I didn't close a loan recently, so there's no money to be transferred over, kind of thing. And the aspect becomes like, okay, like spirals off into these 8 other issues that really don't have anything to do with the money, but it comes back to like, okay, she's worried that she's not going to be taken care of. And so it takes that next step from me of going, I have the plan, I'm working the plan, I will not miss. And being able to say, like, I understand that we may be short for a little while here, but the profit and the margin and everything that you're wanting is on the other side of me doing this. And so us communicating back and forth about these worries, that's not helping the situation. And so I understand you're worried. I've got it under control. And that first time I remember having a conversation like that, it's almost like she looked back at me like, who the fuck are you? Like you've never been that guy that's able to say, you've got it, right? Like I've never been consistent enough in that realm. And, we've talked about my story of the inconsistency with the alcohol and all of that stuff. That's where it came from. She did not believe that I could do it. She did not believe that I was taking care of her. So for the first 8 years, 9 years, 10 years of our relationship, it was her planning everything. It was her leading the way. It was her making more money for most of it. It was her having to put the whole damn team on her back. And then they get uncomfortable with it. And then they're testing you. And that, like you said, the testing. And I think that's really where the testing comes from, is like, they're always constantly in that planning mode of like, do I have to step in today? Do I have to take over today? Do I have to be the leader today? And that's that. I really think the mixed messaging for women out there right now too, it's not just for us, right? Like that messaging that's going out for them too. They're hearing both sides. You've got the extremism of take a back seat, and then you've got the extremism of the guy can't do it, so step up. And we've, as a society, we've done that to ourselves. And I think really just getting above that level of quote unquote average with that, and just being able to just do the hard things. The other thing with the hard things, and I want to see if you've recognized this as well, scientifically, our brains have a learning section, right? That learning section creates more neurons and more connections when we do something we don't want to do. And on that side of it, it allows for learning even farther. And so what I feel is like, if I get up one day, the gym is pretty tough. There's very few days where I'm like, I don't want to go to the gym because I know what the other side looks like. But I don't want to make the calls this morning. And then I make the calls, and then I learn, my brain's like searching, because it's gotten to that point of like, okay, we can do things we don't want to do. So here, I'll reward you with something that you want. How have you recognized like that doing the hard, like what comes out the other side?
Yeah, I don't know about the neurons part, but I know every time that I do something that I didn't necessarily want to do, I feel so much better than let's go like, I mean, I'm a huge sweets fan. I love sweets, especially like chocolates and everything like that. And there's times, man, where I just want to give into that. And when I do, I feel amazing right in that moment. But later that day, maybe it's that week, I'm like, dude, why did I do that? Why did I give into that? But whenever I go to the gym and it's like one of those days, dude, I didn't want to go, or maybe I get there and I'm kind of like barely pushing it, and then something triggers. I'm like, why am I here? Am I here actually to push myself, or am I here just to kind of get a workout and just say I got one? And then I end up like crushing the workout. and I feel so much more accomplished like right after it. And going into the rest of the day, I'm like, dude, I crushed this day. Like this is awesome. And then other things start to transpire because of that. But when I allow myself to be less than I can be, it's like everything else becomes less than. But when I push through that hard thing on one area, I tend to push through the hard things in other areas. And so that's kind of the experience I've had in doing those things. And I think Brian Tracy has the book, swallow the frog or first, or eat the frog first, or whatever it's called exactly. But something about just basically do the things that you don't want to do first. And that's the more effective way with life. And that's really what it is. When you start to do those things that are really hard for you to do, that you don't want to do, it makes the things that you want to do that much easier, or things that maybe they're not something that you don't not want to do, but it's not something you're like giddy about doing either. It makes those even easier to do. And then you realize that you can accomplish basically anything you want because you're doing the hard things even when you don't want to do it. And so the days that you're completely on, you know you can do it.
So you talked about what you don't like and how you've come across those challenges. What sets you on fire, Philip?
What sets me on fire, man? I think just I mean, really overall, it probably sounds kind of cheesy, but just learning and growing. I love to challenge myself. And this is one thing my wife can't stand is like you're never satisfied because like I always want to try something new. I always want to try and get better. And it could be just something new like, hey, I'm gonna go run a 5K. Like just cause why not? Like, oh, let's see if I can run it faster tomorrow. Like, and I may not do it for an extended period of time, but I'm always trying to find new things to challenge myself because I feel like as men, especially in our softer society, there's a lot less things that challenge us. And so it's really about that self development, trying to learn something new, trying to master something new at all times.
So what's your next challenge? Or, obviously, like the 5K thing, I've done that too. Like I see a 5K sign up for it and it's in a week and I don't do any training and I show up and you're like, you just challenge yourself to run it as fast as you can. You can't walk 2 days later and it's great. But what's next for you? What's the next challenge?
The next challenge, which I'm falling way behind on this, so this is definitely I'm not gonna hit the target I had for this, but I'll go ahead and put it here. Is that to write my next book? So I've got one book out right now, and I need to write the next one that's more related on around speaking and communication. So it's kind of the next challenge for me.
That's awesome. So one thing I've heard along that line from, I believe it was Wayne Dyer, and it's all about the words that you use. So you said, I need to write my next book. I should write my next book. And I believe, like I said, it's Wayne Dyer where he talks about, I am writing my next book. So
Hmm.
Philip, you are writing your next book and I am looking forward to reading it. So that's what's coming down the pipe from Philip. Man, I appreciate your time today. And seriously, like would love to have you back. And I'm sure we're going to definitely collaborate on some things in the future. So thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and let's definitely get another one in.